Hello everybody, welcome to my kitchen playground, Natalie's Kitchen. For those of you who would like to make the beautiful sourdough loaf, this is the video that will guarantee your success. There will be no more overproof dough or underproof dough. There will be the perfect proof dough only. The most important part of sourdough making is the bulk fermentation. But how can we know when should we stop the bulk fermentation and move on to the next step? Many people estimate the rise in bulk fermentation with their eyes, which is the least accurate way, especially for the beginners. Because the dough rises in the dome shape, which part should we determine it? The top of the dome or the base? This leads to the underproof or overproof dough. Neither of these is the thing we want. Today, I'm going to show you how to use the Aliquot method to determine the stop in bulk fermentation. What is the Aliquot method and how it can tell us about the rise in bulk fermentation that we aim for? We are going to find out. Aliquot technique is the sample that represents the whole batch. What happens in the sample also happens in the main batch. By taking the sample from the dough at the right amount, we can dictate the percentage rise in bulk fermentation that we want. At first, we mix all the ingredients together until it becomes a soggy dough. We will take some of the dough and put it in this sample container. The amount of the sample we need depends on the temperature of that day. To be exactly, it depends on the dough temperature, which may be different from the room temperature. The dough temperature is the sum of the temperature of all the ingredients. If you use the starter right from the fridge, your dough temperature will be lower than the room temperature. Or, if you use the lukewarm water in order to speed up the process, your dough temperature will be higher than the room temperature. Mixing the dough with the machine or mixing the dough in a larger batch also increases the dough temperature. If you want to know your dough temperature, I recommend that you use the thermometer like one in the video. This chart shows the volume of sample we need in the different working temperature condition. Warm dough will continue rising for many hours in the fridge. That is why we have to stop the bulk fermentation sooner. We can use any sample container that have the volume of 30 cc. It may be a shot glass or a plastic sauce cup with lid. Once the dough rises to touch the lid, that is the stop of our bulk fermentation process. This method is more accurate than to estimate the rise with our eyes. Today, temperature is 22 degrees, but I don't like to make the sourdough in the low temperature because it takes 8 to 9 hours for the whole bulk fermentation. I will control my dough temperature to be around 26 to 27 degrees. First, we need to mark the volume in the sample container for the sample dough. Since 1 gram of water is equal to 1 cc of volume, we can use the weight of the water to represent the volume. Fill the water into the sauce cup at the weight, according to the temperature you are going to work with. Mark the level of the water. This will be the volume of the dough in the sample cup. My starter has risen to its peak and now is ready for making the sourdough. After using and feeding your starter for a few months, your starter will be more predictable about how long will it take for the starter to peak after feeding. This will help us plan when should we start mixing the ingredients. I usually feed my 80-gram starter with 40 grams of water and 40 grams of flour in the morning. After lunch, my starter should be at its peak. Then I start mixing the starter and all other ingredients together. The bulk fermentation should finish around 6 p.m. Next is the pre-shape and shape process. Then the dough will be transferred to the fridge and start the cold fermentation process. We will bake it in the next day. The temperature today is 22 degrees. I don't like to make sourdough bread in temperature below 24 degrees because it takes a long time for the bulk fermentation to take place. After mixing all the ingredients together, I will put the dough into the oven with only the light on. But even with the light on, the temperature in the oven can go up to 30 degrees. So I will slightly open the oven door and put the thermometer inside the oven to monitor the temperature. Try to keep the oven temperature at 26 degrees all the time. At 26 to 27 degrees, we will put the dough sample into the plastic cup until it reaches the mark of 21 grams in volume. When the dough rises up to the lid, we then reach the 30% rise in bulk fermentation that we aim for. We will put the sample cup together with the main dough so that they both are in the same environment. This is how the rise in the sample can represent the rise of the main dough. Now it's time to start making the sourdough bread with Aliquot Method. I recommend using bread flour with 12% of protein or higher, strong and mature starter at its peak. If you don't like the hard crust, substitute 20 grams of water in the recipe with milk. Salt can be put in from the start or later in the first fold. First, weigh 150 grams of starter. By using this amount of starter, I can speed up the bulk fermentation process. We need some of starter in a jar for feeding and keep the starter for our next loaf, which I will do it after I rest the dough in the autolyse process. I usually substitute 20 grams of water with milk. It yields the sourdough with softer crust and improves the texture of the bread. Stir until most of the starter was dissolved, then add flour. This is the autolyse process, which is when the flour will absorb the water and the bulk fermentation kicks in. Mix until it becomes the soggy dough. Put some of the dough in the sample container. Try to have the least airspace in the dough as possible. Press the dough to the marked level. How much the sample dough we need will depend on the working temperature of that day. Since the dough sample will rise at the same rate as the main dough, when it rises up to the lid, that is when we stop the bulk fermentation and start the pre-shape. I put the sample dough together with the main dough, cover and let it rest for 30 minutes. It is 22 degrees today, so I will rest the dough in the oven with the light on. After 30 minutes, we will do the first stretch and fold, which is more like the pinch and fold. We will do this for 5 minutes. This is when we build the gluten development to the dough. Gluten development is like a foundation to our bread. The stronger foundation means the bread can rise higher in the oven. Cover and rest the dough for another 40 minutes. Thank you for watching my video. Please subscribe to my channel, Natalie's Kitchen, so that you will not be missed out when I post my new video on YouTube.